a man standing in front of a mirror, wearing one of his iconic glittering costumes, his hands trembling as he prepares another line of cocaine. The year is 1990. He's at the peak of his career, having sold hundreds of millions of records, performed for royalty, and become one of the most recognizable names on the planet. Yet in that moment, staring at his own reflection, he doesn't see Elton John, the legendary superstar. He sees Reginald Dwight, a broken, lonely boy who never felt good enough, drowning in a sea of addiction, bulimia, and self-destruction. This is a man who has everything the world could offer, but feels absolutely nothing inside. What you're about to hear is not just a story of one of music's greatest icons. It's the story of a human being who walked through hell wearing sequins and platform shoes, who lost friends to tragedy, who battled demons most people couldn't imagine, and who somehow found the strength to rebuild himself from the ashes. This is the pain behind the fame. This is the real Elton John. Before the world knew him as Elton John, before the sold-out stadiums and the outrageous costumes, before the #1 hits and the knighthood, there was just Reggie. Reginald Kenneth Dwight was born on March 25, 1947, in Pinner, a modest suburb of London. His childhood home was not filled with music and laughter, but with silence and tension. His father, Stanley Dwight, was a Royal Air Force officer, a cold and distant man who seemed incapable of showing affection. Stanley was often away, and when he was home, he brought with him an atmosphere of military strictness and emotional unavailability. Young Reggie desperately craved his father's approval, but it never came. Years later, Elton would reveal that his father once wrote to his mother saying their son would never amount to anything, that he'd never become a star. Those words cut deeper than any critique from a music journalist ever could. It was a wound that would never fully heal, shaping the insecure, approval-seeking personality that would later fuel both his greatest triumphs and his darkest moments. His mother, Sheila, was a complex figure in her own right. She had her own emotional struggles and mood swings, and while she supported young Reggie's musical talents, their relationship was fraught with complications. Elton has spoken candidly about how his mother could be physically and emotionally harsh. At just 1 year old, he was reportedly beaten by her. Growing up in that household meant walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next emotional storm would hit. Music became his escape, his sanctuary. At the age of 3, little Reggie was already showing remarkable talent at the piano. By 4, he could play complicated pieces by ear. His grandmother recognized his gift and encouraged him, providing the warmth and support his parents couldn't offer. At 11, he won a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music, where he studied for 5 years. But even as his musical abilities flourished, the emotional scars from his childhood continued to deepen. He was a shy, introverted boy with thick glasses, struggling with his weight and his identity, desperately seeking validation from a world that seemed determined to withhold it. The teenager who left the Royal Academy of Music was talented but directionless. He performed in local pubs, playing piano for pennies and pints, dreaming of something bigger but having no clear path to get there. He worked odd jobs, played in a band called Bluesology, backing touring American soul and R&B artists. It was during this time that Reginald Dwight began to feel the weight of ordinariness crushing him. He wanted to be extraordinary. He wanted to be noticed, to be loved, to be everything his father said he'd never be. In 1967, both he and a young poet named Bernie Taupin answered an advertisement in a music magazine from Liberty Records, which was looking for new songwriting talent. When they met, it was as if the universe had conspired to bring together two halves of the same creative soul. Bernie was a dreamer from the English countryside, writing lyrics filled with imagery and emotion. Elton could hear melodies in those words immediately. Their partnership had a unique dynamic that persists to this day. Bernie would write lyrics and give them to Elton, and Elton would compose music to fit them, often in a matter of minutes. They rarely worked in the same room. It was a mystical, almost telepathic creative process that would produce some of the most beloved songs in music history. But success didn't come overnight. The late 1960s saw Elton and Bernie struggling, writing songs for other artists, try breakthrough in a music industry that was exploding with talent. Elton briefly became a session musician and continued to perform wherever he could find a gig. Then came the turning point. In 1970, they released the album Elton John, featuring a song that would change everything, Your Song. Written when Bernie was just 19 and set to music by a 22-year-old Elton in his mother's apartment, this simple, heartfelt ballad captured something universal. The opening lines, "It's a little bit funny," this feeling inside, spoke to anyone who had ever struggled to express their emotions. When Elton performed it on American television, something magical happened. Audiences saw not just a performer, but a genuine artist pouring his heart out through the piano keys. The song climbed the charts on both sides of the Atlantic, reaching number 7 in the UK and number 8 in the US. Suddenly, Reginald Dwight was gone, and Elton John, a name he'd adopted from Bluesology band members Elton Dean and Long John Baldry, was born into stardom. The 1970s became the Elton John decade. Album after album, hit after hit. He dominated the charts with an almost supernatural consistency. Rocket Man in 1972 became an anthem of isolation and alienation, with Bernie's lyrics about an astronaut torn between his mission and his family resonating with anyone who felt disconnected from the world around them. The image of Elton in his outrageous costumes, enormous platform boots, and glittering glasses became iconic. He wasn't just performing. He was creating theater, spectacle, art. Crocodile Rock brought pure joy. Daniel brought heartache. Benny and the Jets brought funk and soul. Then came Goodbye Yellow Brick Road in 1973, a double album that many consider his masterpiece. The title track alone, with its narrative of someone rejecting fame and fortune for a simpler life, hinted at the internal conflict brewing beneath the surface. Here was a man singing about escaping the very life he was living, and the irony wasn't lost on him. The album sold over 30 million copies worldwide and cemented his status as one of the biggest stars on the planet. But with that fame came pressure, expectations, and a loneliness that no amount of applause could fill. Elton was performing constantly, sometimes over 200 shows a year. The lifestyle was grueling, and he began using substances to cope. What started as recreational drug use quickly spiraled into something much darker. Cocaine became his constant companion, helping him get through performances and social obligations. Alcohol numbed the pain of his emotional wounds. And then there was bulimia, a secret he kept hidden for years. The eating disorder developed as another form of control in a life that felt increasingly out of control. He would binge eat, sometimes consuming massive quantities of food, and then purge, repeating the cycle again and again. For 16 years, he battled this disorder in silence, ashamed and unable to stop. It was a different kind of addiction, one that ravaged his body and mind just as severely as the drugs and alcohol. During this period, Elton was also grappling with his sexuality. In 1976, he came out as bisexual in a Rolling Stone interview, a brave move at a time when such admissions could end careers. But the truth was more complex. Deep down, Elton knew he was gay, but society's prejudices and his own internalized shame made it difficult to fully accept himself. In 1984, in what he later described as an attempt to be normal and to please others, he married Renata Blau, a German recording engineer. The marriage was a disaster from the start. Elton was trying to force himself into a mold that didn't fit, and Renata was caught in the middle of his internal struggle. They divorced in 1988, and shortly after, Elton came out publicly as gay. It was a liberating moment, but also a painful one, as it meant acknowledging years of living a lie and hurting someone who didn't deserve it. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Elton formed deep friendships with other artists who understood the unique pressures of fame. One of those friendships was with John Lennon. Their bond was intense and immediate. Elton has described their friendship as a whirlwind romance. Not in a romantic sense, but in the way two souls recognize something essential in each other. They collaborated on music, with Lennon contributing to Elton's version of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and Elton playing on Lennon's Whatever Gets You Through the Night. In November 1974, Elton made a bet with Lennon that if Whatever Gets You Through the Night reached number 1, Lennon would have performed with him at Madison Square Garden. When the song did hit number 1, Lennon kept his promise, and the performance became historic. It was Lennon's last major public appearance before he retreated from public life. Elton also played a role in reuniting Lennon with Yoko Ono after their separation, facilitating a connection that led to their reconciliation. The two remained close friends, and Lennon even named Elton as godfather to his son, Sean. Then came December 8th, 1980. Elton was in his recording studio when he heard the news that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside his apartment building in New York City. The shock was incomprehensible. The brutality of it, the randomness, the sheer injustice of losing such a brilliant mind and beautiful soul to an act of senseless violence left Elton devastated. He couldn't believe it. Other friends had died young, from overdoses and accidents, but they hadn't died like this. Lennon's death left a hole in Elton's heart that never fully closed. It was a reminder that fame couldn't protect you from the darkest aspects of humanity, that no amount of success could shield you from tragedy. In interviews decades later, Elton would still become emotional talking about John, remembering their friendship with both joy and profound sadness. But the losses were only beginning. The late 1980s and early 1990s brought the AIDS crisis to the forefront, and it hit the entertainment and LGBTQ+ communities with devastating force. Elton watched his friends, colleagues, and loved ones fell ill and died. In 1985, he met a teenager named Ryan White, a hemophiliac who had contracted HIV from a contaminated blood transfusion. Ryan became a national symbol of the AIDS epidemic, facing horrific discrimination from his community. He was barred from attending school, his family was ostracized, and he received death threats simply for being HIV positive. When Elton heard Ryan's story, he reached out, and they formed an unlikely but profound friendship. Elton saw in Ryan a courage and grace that humbled him. Here was a kid facing death with more dignity than Elton, with all his wealth and fame, had faced any of his problems. Ryan's family welcomed Elton into their lives, and he became like a second family to him. Elton visited Ryan in the hospital, spent holidays with his family, and tried to use his platform to fight the stigma surrounding AIDS. On April 8, 1990, Ryan White died at the age of 18. Elton was one of his pallbearers at the funeral, and as he helped carry his young friend's coffin, something inside him broke open. Standing there, surrounded by grieving family and friends, Elton realized he was living a lie. He was killing himself with drugs, alcohol, and bulimia, wasting the life that Ryan had fought so hard to keep. Ryan had faced death with courage, while Elton was courting it through his addictions. The contrast was stark and undeniable. At Ryan's funeral, Elton made a decision. He couldn't continue on his destructive path. Ryan's death had to mean something. It had to be a catalyst for change. Shortly after the funeral, Elton checked himself into Lutheran General Hospital in Chicago for 6 weeks of intensive treatment. He addressed his addictions to cocaine, alcohol, and food, and he started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. It was the beginning of a long, difficult journey toward sobriety and self-acceptance. In a letter he wrote to cocaine, Elton acknowledged that he would never touch the substance again, a promise he has kept to this day. Ryan White's legacy saved Elton John's life, and Elton has spent a decade since trying to honor that gift. In 1991, Elton lost another dear friend to AIDS, Freddie Mercury. The Queen frontman had been diagnosed with HIV, but kept his illness private until shortly before his death. Elton had visited Freddie during his final days, watching helplessly as the vibrant, charismatic performer he'd known for years wasted away. Freddie's death on November 24th, 1991, hit Elton hard. They had shared a mutual respect and a deep friendship, and now he was gone. But Freddie had one more gift for Elton. That Christmas, after Freddie's death, a package arrived at Elton's door. Inside was a gift from Freddie, something he'd arranged to be delivered posthumously. It was a pillow. Elton broke down in tears. That simple, thoughtful gesture from beyond the grave showed the kind of person Freddie was, always thinking of his friends, even in his final days. The losses of Ryan and Freddie, along with so many others, galvanized Elton into action. In 1992, he founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation, which has since raised hundreds of millions of dollars for HIV/AIDS prevention, education, and treatment programs around the world. But the tragedies continued. In 1997, Elton experienced another profound loss. Gianni Versace, the legendary fashion designer and one of Elton's closest friends, was murdered outside his Miami Beach mansion on July 15th. The killing was shocking and senseless, the work of a serial killer who took Versace's life for no reason other than twisted notoriety. Elton was devastated. Johnny had designed many of his iconic stage outfits and had been a dear friend. The funeral in Milan was attended by celebrities and fashion icons from around the world, and Elton was there, mourning yet another friend taken too soon. Just weeks after Johnny's funeral, on August 31st, 1997, Elton received a phone call in the middle of the night. Princess Diana had been killed in a car crash in Paris. The news was incomprehensible. Diana, his friend, his partner in fighting AIDS stigma, the woman he'd laughed with, fought with, and reconciled with just weeks earlier at Johnny's funeral, was gone. Elton's friendship with Princess Diana had been one of the most important relationships of his life. They met in the late 1980s and bonded over their shared commitment to AIDS activism and their experiences navigating life in the public eye. Diana was revolutionary in her compassion, touching AIDS patients at a time when ignorance and fear made many people believe you could contract the disease through casual contact. She used her platform to humanize those suffering, and Elton admired her for it. But their friendship wasn't without its rough patches. They had a falling out in 1997 over something trivial, a misunderstanding that led to months of silence. It was only at Johnny Versace's funeral that they reconciled, holding hands and crying together over their shared loss. Elton left that funeral grateful they had mended their relationship, never imagining he'd be mourning Diana herself just 6 weeks later. When Diana's family asked Elton to perform at her funeral, he initially didn't know if he could do it. The grief was too raw, the pain too intense. But he knew he had to honor his friend. Working with Bernie Taupin, Elton reworked Candle in the Wind, a song originally written about Marilyn Monroe, into Candle in the Wind 1997, a tribute to Diana. The new lyrics, Goodbye England's Rose, May You Ever Grow in Our Hearts, captured the world's grief. On September 6, 1997, Elton sat at a piano in Westminster Abbey in front of over 2 billion television viewers worldwide and performed the song. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. His voice trembled, his hands shook, but he got through it, giving Diana the farewell she deserved. The single became the best-selling single of all time, with all proceeds going to charity. But for Elton, it was never about the record sales. It was about saying goodbye to a friend who had touched his life in ways he could never fully express. The late 1990s and early 2000s brought both challenges and blessings. Elton continued to tour and record, but his perspective had shifted. He was sober, in therapy, and working on understanding the traumas and patterns that had shaped his life. In 1993, he met David Furnish at a dinner party. David was a Canadian filmmaker, intelligent, grounded, and kind. Everything Elton needed in a partner. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine love. In 2005, on the day civil partnerships became legal in the UK, Elton and David became one of the first couples to enter into a civil partnership. They later married in 2014 when same-sex marriage became legal. With David, Elton found the stable, loving relationship he'd always craved. Together, they've raised 2 sons, Zachary and Elijah, both born via surrogate. Fatherhood transformed Elton. The man who had once been so consumed by his addictions and insecurities found new purpose in being a present, loving parent. He has spoken openly about how being a father has grounded him, given him a reason to stay healthy and sober, and filled the emotional void that had haunted him for so long. Looking back at Elton John's life, it's easy to focus on the glitz and glamour, the record sales, the iconic performances, the knighthood from Queen Elizabeth II. But the real story is one of survival. It's the story of a boy who never felt loved by his father, who turned to music as salvation, who achieved unimaginable success but found it hollow, without inner peace. It's the story of a man who battled addiction for 20 years, who nearly killed himself through drugs, alcohol, and bulimia, but who found the strength to get sober and stay sober for over 3 decades. It's the story of someone who lost friend after friend to tragedy, disease, and violence, but who channeled that grief into activism and philanthropy that has saved countless lives. Elton has been open about his struggles in a way that few celebrities of his generation have been. He's talked candidly about his addiction, his eating disorder, his sexuality, his difficult relationships with his parents, his mistakes, and his growth. That vulnerability has made him not just an icon, but a human being people can relate to. His music reflects this journey. Songs like Someone Saved My Life Tonight tell the story of his near-suicide attempt in the 1960s and his rescue by his friend Long John Baldry. I'm Still Standing is a defiant anthem of resilience. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me captures the desperation of someone afraid of being alone with their thoughts. Even in his most upbeat, celebratory songs, there's often an undercurrent of melancholy, a recognition of life's fragility. That emotional honesty is what has made his music timeless. People don't just hear catchy melodies. They hear their own struggles, their own pain, their own hope reflected back at them. Elton's willingness to be vulnerable, to admit his flaws and failures, has given permission to millions of others to do the same. In a world that often demands perfection, especially from public figures, Elton John has shown that it's okay to be broken, to struggle, to fall, as long as you keep getting back up. His advocacy work has been equally impactful. The Elton John AIDS Foundation has become one of the most effective organizations in the fight against HIV/AIDS, funding programs in over 25 countries. Elton has used his celebrity to bring attention to issues that others ignore, whether it's LGBTQ+ rights, addiction recovery, or mental health awareness. He's lobbied governments, organized benefit concerts, and personally donated millions of dollars to causes he believes in. When asked why he does it, Elton often points back to Ryan White, to Freddie Mercury, to all the friends he's lost. He does it because he survived when they didn't, and he feels a responsibility to honor their memories by making the world better. That sense of purpose has given his life meaning beyond the music. As he's aged, Elton has also grappled with the physical toll of his lifestyle and career. Decades of performing in heavy costumes, platform boots, and the physical strain of his past addictions have taken their toll. He's had hip surgery, prostate cancer, and various other health issues. In recent years, he's also revealed that a severe eye infection has left him with limited vision in one eye, a distressing development for someone whose career has been so visually spectacular. But even as his body has betrayed him, his spirit remains strong. In 2018, Elton announced his Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, a multi-year global tour that would be his last. He wanted to go out on his own terms, to say goodbye to the fans who had supported him for over 5 decades. The tour became the highest-grossing tour ever by a solo artist, a testament to the enduring love people have for his music and his message. Each concert was a celebration, not just of his hits, but of his journey. Watching Elton perform, even in his 70s, you see a man who has come full circle. The insecure boy desperate for approval has become a confident man who knows his worth. The addict who nearly died has become a beacon of recovery. The person who struggled with his identity has become a proud advocate for LGBTQ+ rights. The man who lost so many friends has become someone who honors their memories through action and compassion. The evolution is profound and moving, a reminder that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become the person you were meant to be. Elton's relationship with his parents remained complicated until the end. His father, Stanley, died in 1991, and they were never fully reconciled. Stanley had started a second family after leaving Sheila, and Elton discovered he had half-brothers he barely knew. The pain of that rejection never fully healed. But Elton has spoken about how therapy and his own experience as a father have helped him understand his father's limitations. His mother, Sheila, lived until 2017, and their relationship was tumultuous until the very end. They had periods of estrangement, particularly in the later years, and didn't speak for several years before her death. When she passed, Elton was reportedly saddened but also at peace, having done the work to understand that his parents' inability to love him the way he needed wasn't a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of their own wounds and limitations. That realization was liberating, freeing him from the cycle of seeking approval from people who couldn't give it. The legacy Elton John leaves behind is multifaceted. Musically, he sold over 300 million records worldwide, making him one of the best-selling artists of all time. He's won 5 Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, a Tony Award, and numerous other honors. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994 and knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1998 for his contributions to music and charity. His songs have become part of the cultural fabric, played at weddings and funerals, in movies and television shows, in moments of joy and grief. But beyond the accolades, Elton's legacy is about transformation. He showed the world that you can survive addiction and come out stronger. He proved that you can live authentically as a gay man in a world that often rejects that truth. He demonstrated that wealth and fame are meaningless without inner peace and meaningful connections. He taught us that grief can be channeled into action, that pain can be transformed into purpose. Most importantly, he showed us that it's never too late to change your story. In recent interviews, Elton has reflected on his life with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. He's acknowledged the pain, the mistakes, the years-lost addiction, but he's also celebrated the incredible journey he's been on. He's spoken about how different his life is now compared to the chaos of his earlier years. Instead of snorting cocaine before concerts, he's reading bedtime stories to his sons. Instead of waking up wondering what he'd done the night before, he's waking up clear-headed and present. Instead of feeling empty despite his success, he feels fulfilled in ways he never thought possible. The man who once didn't know if he wanted to live now doesn't want to miss a single moment with his family. That transformation is the real miracle of Elton John's life, more impressive than any hit song or sold-out stadium. He took his broken pieces and built something beautiful, not just for himself, but for everyone who has been touched by his music, his advocacy, and his story. As his farewell tour came to an end, Elton performed his final concerts with a mixture of joy and melancholy. He thanked his fans, his husband, his children, Bernie Taupin, and all the people who had supported him throughout his career. He acknowledged that while the touring was ending, the music would live on, and his work to the AIDS Foundation would continue. In his final shows, you could see the little boy from Pinner who just wanted to play piano and be loved, now standing before thousands of adoring fans as Sir Elton John, beloved worldwide. The sequin outfits and elaborate costumes might be packed away, but the heart that beats beneath them, scarred and healed, broken and mended, continues to inspire. Elton's story reminds us that fame and success are not antidotes to pain. Money can't buy self-acceptance. Applause can't fill the void left by childhood trauma. The only things that truly heal are honesty, connection, and the courage to face your demons and do the work to overcome them. When you listen to your song, Now, knowing everything Elton has been through, the lyrics take on deeper meaning. When he sings about how wonderful life is while you're in the world, you understand it's not just romantic sentiment, but a hard-won appreciation for existence itself. When you hear I'm Still Standing, you know it's not just a catchy pop song, but an anthem of survival against impossible odds. When Candle in the Wind plays, you feel the weight of all the loss he's experienced, channeled into one heartbreaking tribute. Every song becomes a chapter in the larger story of a man who refused to let his pain define him, who turned his trauma into art, and who used his platform not just for personal gain, but to make the world a little bit better. That's the real legacy of Elton John, not just the music, though the music is extraordinary, but the man behind the music, flawed and fabulous, broken and beautiful, struggling and ultimately triumphant. The pain behind the fame is real. It's addiction and eating disorders, childhood trauma and unrequited love, friends lost and battles fought. But the triumph is equally real. It's sobriety sustained for over 30 years. It's a loving marriage and devoted fatherhood. It's a foundation that has saved countless lives. It's music that has brought joy to millions. It's the courage to be vulnerable in a world that values invulnerability. It's the strength to keep going when everything inside you wants to give up. Elton John's story is ultimately one of hope, a reminder that no matter how dark things get, there is always a possibility of redemption, of change, of building a life worth living. He stands as proof that you can survive the unsurvivable, overcome the overwhelming, and come out the other side not just intact but transformed. The boy who was told he'd never amount to anything became one of the most successful and beloved entertainers of all time. More importantly, he became a man at peace with himself, a man who could look back at his life with both honesty about the pain and gratitude for the journey. As we close this chapter on Elton John's extraordinary life, we're left with a profound sense of awe. This is someone who has lived multiple lifetimes in one, who has experienced the highest highs and the lowest lows, who has looked death in the face multiple times and chosen life. His music will outlive us all, playing in elevators and concert halls, at celebrations and memorials, reminding future generations of the genius that emerged from pain. But more than that, his story will continue to inspire anyone who feels broken, anyone struggling with addiction, anyone fighting to accept themselves, anyone mourning a loss, anyone simply trying to survive another day. Elton John's message is clear. You're stronger than you know. Your pain has purpose. Your story isn't over, and there is always, always hope. From Reginald Dwight to Sir Elton John, from a lonely boy at a piano to a legend saying his final farewell, the journey has been remarkable, heartbreaking, inspiring, and above all, deeply, beautifully human. And that, perhaps, is the greatest achievement of all.